Today to meet us at Soul 57, 1326 Florida Avenue for more donations to the occupiers. I'm Vern Avery Brown.
And I'm Esther Rivera.
And stay tuned for
Africa Now with Mwiza Muntali.
Thank you to Luke.
At 89.3 FM, this is member-supported WPFW, Washington.
Welcome to Africa Now, Washington's only program dedicated to covering the issues facing the continent and the entire African diaspora. Today, Nigeria protests over fuel subsidy withdrawal. Stay tuned. Africa Now is next. Welcome to Africa Now. I'm your host, Mwiza Muntali. We're first going to begin the show with a news segment with Nike Oyedebayo.
You're on to Africa Now news segment on this day, Wednesday, the 18th of January, 2012. Our newscast brings you stories that raises the consciousness of Black people around the world. Africa Now seeks to reconnect histories, opportunities, and struggles between Africa and the diaspora. I am Nike Oyebanjo. Now, the headlines. The annual Martin Luther King holiday was observed on Monday. We will take a look at Dr. King's life and legacy. Liberian President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf begins a second term in office, and the nationwide strike in Nigeria has been suspended. The news begins right now. Martin Luther King Day is a public holiday observed in the United States. This is in honor of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., an African-American civil rights leader. During his lifetime, he led peaceful demonstrations against injustice and preached freedom, equality, and dignity for all races. He championed economic justice and a just U.S. foreign policy. He was born January 15, 1929, and assassinated April 4, 1968. One of his hallmark achievements was winning the Nobel Peace Prize at age 35, the youngest to win at the time. His late wife, Coretta Scott King, fought for many years to make his birthday a national holiday. The King holiday was finally signed into law November 2, 1983. The first public holiday took place January 20, 1986. Monday's observance of the holiday is the first since the dedication of the Martin Luther King Memorial in Washington, D.C. last year. Many observe the King holiday as a national day of service to commemorate his legacy. A look at some activities in his honor. The National Action Network hosted a breakfast titled, Don't Celebrate, Emulate, to honor civil rights activists living up to King's legacy. In addition, DemocracyNow.org interviewed TransAfrica's founder Randall Robinson and author Michelle Alexander about the mass incarcerations of African Americans and how it affects the achievements of the civil rights movement. You can listen to the entire interview at DemocracyNow.org. Now to the story of a woman who played a role in bringing peace to a country torn apart by civil war. Liberian President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf begins a second term in office. The inauguration ceremony was attended by dignitaries such as President of Senegal, Abdoulaye Wade, and President of Benin, Boni Yayi. United States Secretary of State Hillary Clinton led the American delegation to the ceremony. Like Dr. King, Ellen Sirleaf adhered to nonviolence and fought for freedom and equality for women's rights in Liberia. She was among 3 women awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 2011. In her inauguration address, she said, I call on you, my fellow citizens, to join me in renewing our resolve to restore our country and lead it to its grand destiny. I call you today to share a healthy pride in what we've done, but still a fiercer resolve to do all that must be done so that all Liberians thrive in freedom, equality, and friendship. Sirleaf is currently the only female head of state in Africa. She was sworn into office in 2006 and became Africa's first female president. To read more on this story, go to allafrica.com. Now to an update on the situation in Nigeria. The strike has been suspended. This came after President Goodluck Jonathan agreed to cut the cost of petrol following weeks of protests. The Nigerian Labour Congress said they made the decision to save lives and in the interest of national survival. Describing the 6-day protests as a success, the president of the Nigerian Labour Congress, Abdulwahid Omar, said, "We are sure that no government or institution will take Nigerians for granted again." The protests were a reaction to the removal of the consumer fuel subsidy, which led prices of transportation and other essential amenities to double. In a televised broadcast, President Jonathan said prices will drop by 60% per liter, which is still higher than what Nigerians paid before the subsidy was removed. Nigeria is a major oil-producing country in Africa. The oil subsidy was one of the few benefits citizens enjoyed from the country's oil wealth. To read more about this story, visit bbc.co.uk and allafrica.com. Here are other news stories making the headlines. Guinea-Bissau mourns the death of President Malam Bakay Sanneh. Sanneh died in a Paris hospital after a long illness. He was 64 years old. Guinea-Bissau is preparing for another presidential election. Tunisians celebrate the first-year anniversary of the removal of former President Ben Ali. He was ousted from power January 14, 2011. Ben Ali was president of Tunisia for 23 years. His years in office were marked by unemployment and corruption. Ben Ali is currently in exile in Saudi Arabia. He has been convicted for economic crimes and is being tried in absentia. Chinese President Hu Jintao will visit Addis Ababa on January 28 to commission the new African Union headquarters. The new facility was financed by China and has been called China's gift to Africa. The complex features a 2,500-seat amphitheater and an helicopter landing pad so that visiting dignitaries can be flown in from the airport. And that's our news broadcast today. I am Nike Oyebanjo. African Now with Mumwiza Muntali continues.
Welcome back to Africa Now. I'm your host, Mwiza Muntali. Throughout Africa Now, we strive to connect the histories, opportunities, and struggles between Africa and the diaspora. As just reported in our news segment, the labor unions in Nigeria said on Monday morning that they are suspending street protests. The protests occurred as a result of President Goodluck Jonathan's removal of the fuel subsidies. This action led to price increases in food, transport, and other sectors, causing nationwide demonstrations, just as the people here in the United States are making their voice heard with the Occupy movement. So are the people in Nigeria doing the same, challenging the powers that be. Joining us in the studio is a representative of the Occupy Nigeria movement in Washington, D.C. chapter, Mr. Nnamdi Akwada. And he's a social justice activist. He's also, his profession is a social worker. He obtained his Master's of Social Work degree from the University of Maryland in Baltimore. He's written and commented on justice and equality issues globally and in Nigeria and in Africa in particular. He's also a Washington, D.C. coordinator of Let There Be Light in Nigeria and Nigerian Million March. Nnamdi, welcome to Africa Now.
Good morning.
Good morning. Could you give us a brief update of the situation in Nigeria at the present time?
The current situation in Nigeria is that, as was reported in the news, there was a unitary decision by the president to suspend the nationwide strike against the fuel subsidy removal. And most of us in the Occupy movement are saying that the labor movement, who were not the originators of the Occupy movement, were saying that they have betrayed the people of Nigeria because the action actually began with the people. The people initiated the strikes, and they went out on the street to protest the subsidy that took effect on the 1st of the year. So we're saying they've betrayed us, and we're still calling on the reinstatement of the original price of petroleum, which was
before the removal of the subsidy.
Before the removal of the subsidy, which was actually 65 naira per liter. So we're calling for that price to be reinstated. And
they suspended the strike soon after they met with President Goodluck Jonathan, I think, and his representatives, right?
They met with them, and they claimed to have suspended the strike, but on the 16th, which was on Monday. But for you to understand what's going on in Nigeria, you have to put everything within context. And the context of the situation in Nigeria is this: Nigeria has been going through an uprising in the northern part of Nigeria for the last 2 years, the Boko Haram issue. And on the 25th of December, we had a situation where, the state next to the federal capital, Abuja, we had a Christmas Day bombing in front of the church. And on that occasion, a whole lot of people died. And the Nigerian nation was still in shock, absolute shock and horror about that development. And a few days after that event, then you had the members of Boko Haram eventually calling for the Muslims and the Northerners in the southern part of the country to come back to the north and ask the Easterners and the Southerners to go back to the south. So in that moment of hysteria and in that moment of confusion, and anticipating that the government was going to intervene and, strengthen security, we are working on the first of the year with, this pseudo fuel subsidy removal, which we actually think is a tax on the poor Nigerian masses. The regular Nigerian folks that if overnight they saw the price of, not just the petroleum, the price of food, commodities, transportation, everything doubling overnight.
And there was no prior discussion when they implemented this subsidy removal. It was just done with the announcement from the president's office, right?
There had been negotiations before, and all indications were that sometime in April of this year we were going to come to a conclusion as to the negotiations, but the announcement came out of the blue. It came as a shock to most Nigerians. That's why from south to north, from east to west, Nigerians all poured into the street in condemnation of the unitary decision of the federal government.
And that's Nnamdi Akwada. He is the Washington, D.C. representative of the Occupy Nigeria movement. We're talking about the fuel subsidy removal in Nigeria and the protests that occurred after are still occurring in Nigeria. And the Occupy Nigeria movement, how old has it been? How's the inspiration behind that movement? Does it have links with the movement here in the United States?
The Occupy Nigeria movement has inspiration from obviously the worldwide Occupy movement, the one in the United States, the one that happened in Great Britain, the one that happened in Greece and in Spain also. It has the inspiration, but on last year on the 24th of October, we had a campaign where we decided to march about the lack of electricity in Nigeria, which was the Let There Be Light in Nigeria Million Miles. So that's part of the genesis of the Occupy Nigeria, especially in the West. But the Occupy Nigeria movement started, basically as an inspiration from all the Occupy movements in the Arab streets and in all over the world.
Do you collaborate also with the Occupy movement here in Washington?
Yeah, we've
supporting their struggle in this.
Yeah, we've been supporting their struggle, and I will say that the labor movement here, the labor union, and the Occupy movement in the DC area have been staunch supporters of the Occupy Nigeria movement in the DC area.
And you've had a number of demonstrations recently. I think there's one at the White House and one at the World Bank and IMF.
Yeah, we had one on the 9th of January. We had one in front of the World Bank because, like most of the listeners to this station know, the World Bank system and the IMF, the economic, solutions to so-called solutions are at the cross of the matter of this development in Nigeria. So we've had demonstrations at the World Bank on the 9th. On the 13th, we had also a demonstration in front of the IMF building. And today we're going to be at the Nigerian embassy demonstrating against the continued taxation on the poor and regular Nigerian people.
Yeah, and could you elaborate a bit more about in the context of the World Bank and IMF, their role in the fuel subsidy? Actually,
the current finance minister of Nigeria, Mrs. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, is actually the former deputy president of the World Bank. So she has, direct links with the World Bank. And in recap, we find out that she actually was part of the two prior administrations. And then Nigerians were sold a dumb in the sense that we were told that we were going to refinance our loans. And then from the month we're going to pay the Western creditors about $30 billion, and from that we can be able to develop our infrastructures. We can improve transportation, healthcare for our people, and everything that comes with that. Well, the sad reality is that after we paid Western countries billions of dollars, we've not seen no improvement. And now again, we're in the same, limbo where we're being told that all we need to do is to tax the poor at the expense of the rich in Nigeria, the elites in Nigeria, and things are going to improve. And we're saying, we've been through this route before. Why is it that the federal government is so adamant to put taxation on the people, why they can't even provide security for Nigerians on the streets? For example, in terms of the situation, the Occupy movement in Nigeria right now, we have a situation where on the 16th, people wanted to actually go out on the streets, but the president moved the armed forces, the military, onto the streets to intimidate, ordinary Nigerians that wanted to go out on the street. And while this was going on, you had a situation where the chief suspect in the Boko Haram issue was escaped from, the clutches of the security operatives. So we're asking, where is the priority of the government? If they can't protect ordinary citizens, why are they stopping demonstrations, peaceful protests, and why are they stopping the agitation of the masses, which is, we don't want to be taxed. We want them to instead focus on the subsidies that they provide for the oil importers. We have refineries that don't work. We have refineries that are non-functional because the government and their supporters and their patrons have sabotaged our refineries. Our refineries no longer work. So what we do is that we ship the oil outside, then import it back into the country. And those that are involved in that trade are basically the sponsors of our government, the ones that sponsor their elections.
And so apart from the making sure the subsidy stays, what are the other demands of the Occupy Nigeria movement?
We're calling for transparency. We're calling for transparency in the Nigerian government. We're calling for transparency because the level of corruption is, mind-boggling. And we have a situation where between the finance minister and the petroleum minister, they've appeared in front of the Nigerian Congress within the past few days, which is our National Assembly. And between them, they don't know where the amount of $2 billion is between the finance minister and the petroleum minister. And they're pointing fingers at each other. Where on else does this happen? So we're calling for transparency. We're calling for in terms of the petroleum subsidy, we're calling for the negotiations to keep on. We instead of having just the representatives of the union, which have sold out the people, we want, human rights activists, social activists, economic justice activists to be in on those negotiations. So we're calling for transparency and corruption needs to be dealt with in Nigeria, and we believe that this is the opportunity to send that message to the government.
And what type of solidarity are you looking for from people from here in Washington, D.C. in particular, in the West of USA?
In the Washington, D.C. area and in the entire United States, we're asking for people to call, their congressional representatives and call the Nigerian embassy in Washington, D.C. and let them know that we don't want a situation where the Nigerian government and the world financial institutions, banking institutions, are penalizing the Nigerian people. We want, equity in Nigeria. We want justice. We want transparency, and we want the end of corruption. We want the end of corruption in Nigeria. And
there's going to be a demonstration, you said, at the Nigerian embassy today.
Today we're meeting from 12 o'clock to 2 o'clock. We're going to be in front of at the Nigerian embassy demonstrating. And
that's on International Boulevard. Is it an International Drive near UDC?
Yeah, the address is 3539 International Court, Northwest Washington, D.C., zip code 20008.
And that's near the Van Ness Metro Station and right behind UDC.
Yes, sir, you're correct.
And how do people get more information about the Occupy Nigeria movement website and contact information?
The contact information, we're currently on Facebook, and our name is called the Occupy Nigerian Movement, Washington, D.C., so you can get contact with us through the Facebook.
You can say the Occupy Nigeria Movement on Facebook.
Yeah, Occupy Nigerian Movement, Washington, D.C. on Facebook.
And there's no phone number or anything?
We don't currently have a phone number.
And, thank you very much, Nnamdi Akwada. And he's with the Occupy Nigeria movement here in Washington, D.C. chapter. And he's also the Washington, D.C. coordinator of the Let There Be Light in Nigeria, and also the Nigerian Million March, which occurred last year in October. And for more information, you can go to Facebook on Occupy Nigeria.
I can provide you with my cell phone. Okay. It's 240-353-6862. 240-353-6862.
353-6862. 240-353-6862. And that's Nnamdi Akwada with the Occupy Nigeria movement in Washington, D.C. We're going to take a short break, and we're going to continue our discussion with Nii Kwakwete about the situation in Nigeria. You're listening to Africa Now on WPFW.
International team. International team. International team.
ITT.
International team.
International team.
International team.
Oh.
Wynton Marsalis is one of the most remarkable young musicians to appear in jazz today. It's how writer Stanley Krauss described the gifted trumpeter in the liner notes to Marsalis' self-titled debut record. Released in January of 1982, this year is the 30th anniversary of that watershed recording. Hi, this is Bobby Hill. Please join me on the Inside Wednesdays edition of Midday Jazz for a segment called Since Wynton, where you'll hear invited musicians, writers, poets, educators, and others comment on Wynton Marsalis' various impacts on the music and culture of jazz. Here's trumpeter Louis Flip Barnes.
The great thing, as far as, the initial impact of Wynton on the scene is it was a cat that, was playing, a young guy that was playing jazz, playing trumpet, and were also, hey, he could play great classical music too. Ooh, okay.
Again, that's Since Wynton, heard on the Inside Wednesdays edition of Midday Jazz from 1 p.m. until 3 p.m. only on WPFW at 89.3 FM.
Welcome back to Africa Now. I'm your host, Muiza Muntali. We're going to continue our discussion on the situation in Nigeria surrounding the fuel subsidy removal protest. Joining us in the studio is Mr. Nii Akwete. Mr. Nii Akwete is the independent Africa analyst based in Washington, D.C. Before this, he was executive director of Africa Action in Washington, D.C. and also founder of Democracy and Conflict Research Institute in Accra, Ghana, and also founding executive director of OSIWA with the West African arm of George Soros Foundation in Abuja, Nigeria. He's also an adjunct. He was also an adjunct professor of African Studies in the School of Foreign Service at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C., and editor and research director at Trans-Africa Forum, Washington, D.C. again. Nii, welcome to Africa Now. Welcome back to Africa Now, I should say.
Thank you very much, Muiza. It's great to be here, and since this is the first of the year that I'm here, let me say Happy New Year. Happy New Year to you too.
I don't know if you heard the conversation I had with Nnamdi Akwada, who's the coordinator of the Occupy Nigeria movement in D.C. here, and we talked about the fuel subsidy removal in Nigeria and the role that the international financial institutions played, particularly the IMF, World Bank institution. If you could elaborate a bit further about that connection. We touched on it a bit.
It will be my pleasure, because I think that's in fact a very important part of the story that has not been emphasized enough. The Nigerian finance minister, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, used to be the managing director of the World Bank. She's very high up. The World Bank sent her to be part of the cabinet. She was part of President Obasanjo's cabinet, and it didn't work out, and she came back, and now she's returned to be the finance minister for President Jonathan. Christine Lagarde, the head of the IMF, visited Nigeria in December. On December 21, when she left, she said, we'll support the reforms that they are doing. Now, the finance minister in Nigeria says that, this has nothing to do with the IMF, we are doing it on our own. I really think no one should believe that. This is standard IMF policy, and they are pushing it, and there is the evidence is all over the place. The Nigeria doing it has hit the news, but a number of African countries have done it in the last month. Ghana has done it, Guinea has done it, Chad has done it, Cameroon has done it. All of them were pushed by the IMF to do it. So I cannot stress enough.
So it's not an accident.
It's not an accident. It is not an accident this time around. But as you know, this is their standard policy. I can think back to 30 years ago in Ghana when they were pushing Rawlings to take away subsidies for education, which I think is an egregious thing to do to a country. There are street children all over Accra because their parents can't pay to put them to school. This is what the IMF has always done. So it is not true that they are not behind it. They are behind it, but these days it's dangerous for them to show their hand too much. So they get the Nigerian government to say, we are doing it on our own. Now, the economics of it is very questionable, but the fact of the matter is that this is what the IMF wants all over Africa, but not just Africa. They are doing it as we speak. Yesterday, there were demonstrations in Romania, Greece, there are demonstrations against the same thing. Subsidy removal is part of austerity measures. That's what the IMF believes in, and it is a terrible policy, actually. There is a very good essay in the current New York Review of Books by Jeff Madrick, who used to work for the New York Times. He's probably the best U.S. writer on explaining economics. And the title of his piece, which just came out yesterday in the New York Review of Books online, it says how austerity is killing Europe. And he explains why austerity doesn't make sense. The debate is even in this country.
Yeah, the Occupy movement.
Yes, the Occupy movement, and even between Obama and the Republicans running, the Republicans want austerity. Cut the deficit, government is too big. It's all code speak for saying that government should be small and shouldn't help poor people, and that the market should be free to do whatever it wants. So from Nigeria to the United States through Europe is all of the same thing.
The extension of the neoliberal policies.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Pushed by Reagan and others.
Yes, yes. In fact, this is the thing. This whole idea of letting the market do whatever it wants, letting poor people fend for themselves, as Obama said in 2008 in Denver, and said it again recently, it's that you are on your own economic policy. It says to poor people, you are on your own. Reagan and Thatcher started it. This is what got the global economy into the trouble that it is in now. And the shame of it is that a lot of people have changed their minds. Alan Greenspan have come out and said, okay, we made mistakes. Others have done it, but the IMF has not done it. And their money, their budget was tripled in April of 2009. And so they are still doing these terrible policies. It is a very dangerous policy. It's not just Nigeria.
And as Nia Kwete, we're talking about the fuel subsidy removal in Nigeria. You listen to Africa Now on WPFW. We're going to take a short break, and we're going to continue our discussion with guests here in the studio as well as in Nigeria. Yeah.
On Friday, January 20th, 2012, an evening with Dr. Gerald Horne at the Thurgood Marshall Center. Join our community, friends, and neighbors when we welcome distinguished Professor Dr. Gerald Horne when he discusses his most recent publications, Negro Comrades of the Crown and Fighting in Paradise. A frequent guest analyst on WPFW's weekly public affairs program, Jazz and Justice, with host Tom Porter, Gerald Horne is the Moores Professor of History and African American Studies at the University of Houston and has published more than 30 books. Dr. Horne has published on W.E.B. Du Bois and has written books on a wide range of neglected but by no means marginal or minor episodes of world history. He specializes in illuminating previously obscure or misrepresented struggles of humanity for social justice, in particular communist struggles and struggles against imperialism, colonialism, fascism, and racism. That's this Friday, January 20th, 2012, from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. at the Thurgood Marshall Center, located at 1816 12th Street, Northwest, Washington, D.C. This event is co-sponsored by IKG, Tom Porter, and the Center for Advanced Studies. For more information, contact Tom Porter at 202-265-1114. WPFW, your station for jazz and justice.
If there's anybody out there.
Welcome back to Africa Now. I'm your host, Muiza Muntali. We're going to continue our discussion on the situation in Nigeria surrounding the fuel subsidy removal protest. Before we continue, I just want to make a quick announcement of an event that's taking place on January 24th from at 6:30 p.m. and that's going to be at Busboys and Poets 14th and V Street. It's called Tectonic Shifts: Haiti Since the Earthquake, with the editor Mark Schuler, and this is being presented to you by CIPRA and also TransAfrica and Busboys and Poets. You can get more information at transafrica.org. And again, CIPRA is the Center for Economic and Policy Research, and also Teaching for Change and Busboys and Poets are making this presentation go to transafricaforum.org or call 202-223-1960, extension 137. Again, the event is on 24th of January, called Tectonic Shifts, Haiti Since the Earthquake. And we're in the studio with Mr. Nia Kwete, talking about the situation in Nigeria. And we also have joining us on the line from Port Harcourt in Nigeria to discuss this topic is Dr. Edward Obi. Dr. Edward Obi is a Nigerian activist and Roman Catholic priest of Missionary Society of St. Paul, as well as being the executive director of the Center for Social and Corporate Responsibility, CSCR, in Port Harcourt, Nigeria. He's also been appointed to the Oil and Gas Desk of the Church and Society Department of the Catholic Bishops' Conference in Nigeria as a consultant. Father Obi comes from Nigeria's Niger Delta region, and his interest in environmental justice comes from the first-hand experience of the devastation that's caused by the oil industry in parts of that region. Dr. Obi, welcome back to Africa Now.
Thank you very much, Musa. My pleasure to be here again.
And you're in the heart of the oil production in Port Harcourt. What has been the atmosphere like since the subsidies removal announcement?
Well, what is happening here in the last, let's say, 1 week? First, I'll talk about what happened with the Shell double spill. Shell, first of all, their platform got a little bit of problem, and a lot of oil was spilled into the Atlantic Ocean. And then a couple of days after that, there was another major spill in one of their trunk lines. This one is on land, and they're battling to kind of bring both spills, even as we speak, to some kind of attenuation. Yeah, but then also Chevron has a bit of a problem themselves, because their platform right inside the sea, a rig that they have off the coast of Nigeria, is still burning as we speak, spewing fumes into the air and spilling oil into the sea. So there's a lot going on in terms of adverse effects of the oil industry in the Niger Delta at the moment.
So, in light of the fact that the government has made that announcement of removal of the subsidy, there must be a lot of anger there, and the fact that you have environmental discussion, and then you have.
Well, I need to clarify something. The anger of the people is justified anger, because it is not really anger directed against the removal of the subsidy as such. Mm-hmm. Indeed, many Nigerians believe it's about time to do away with such a subsidy. But the problem, however, is if you do away with the subsidy, it means that the government will not pay the subsidy, but the citizens are being made to pay the subsidy to the same people who have been feeding fat from Nigeria's resources. The people are angry because the government has not demonstrated, until just a couple of days ago, have not demonstrated sufficient will to sanitize that segment of our economy, because a number of individuals, a very small percentage of Nigerians, have been, shortchanging the rest of the citizens, and then also the Nigerian state by importing fuel, exporting first of all our crude, then getting it refined in neighboring countries, importing it back into the country, and then selling it at such a high cost. In other words, including the money that they are charging for ships staying on the berthing on the jetties for several weeks at a time, sometimes months at a time, waiting for their cargo to be offloaded or waiting for their cargo to be unloaded. So all of this put together makes the cost of petroleum so high that Nigerians are asking why make the citizens to pay such a price if our own refineries could be made to work. This is the anger of the people, really.
And what is the role of the international, multinational oil corporations in in this whole issue. I'll first start with you, Dr. Obi, and you talked about a little bit about it when your answer. But if you could also, what have they been saying about it? Because it looks like for them it's they have been exploiting and winning on all levels. What is their?
Oh yes. The international oil companies are in a winning streak here, because it doesn't really concern them, because they are part of the so-called cabal that have been benefiting from all these importations. We have our own national oil company, so-called national oil company. It's called NNPC, that is Nigerian National Oil, Nigerian National Petroleum Company. Now, NNPC is the center of the patronage system in Nigeria, is the headquarters of corruption, as many people have described it, because the NNPC is not really an oil company as such, because it does not have the capacity to exploit, win oil, or produce oil. It depends on the international oil companies to do all of that work for it, and then it is engaged in joint ventures with these oil companies, while the oil companies, are busy, giving to NNPC what they consider the NNPC deserves. There is no way that the NNPC knows how much oil is on the ground or how much oil the international oil companies produce, because the NNPC lacks the capacity. And so the NNPC is right at the center of this entire debate, because people are asking what really is the relevance of such a company if it doesn't have the capacity to do what it should do as an oil company. It's acting both as a regulator and as an oil company. For what purpose? People are asking.
And I'm going to
purpose is to feed into the patronage system in Nigeria.
And I'm going to go to Nia Kwete here in the studio to also talk a little bit further about the international oil corporation's role in this issue.
Yes, of course. And I think, a lot of Nigeria's oil is sold to the United States. It's almost about 9% of all the oil the U.S. gets now. It's rivaling what it gets from Saudi Arabia. And of course, this is done through multinational cooperation. So they are center of it. So one way to look at it is, what is the U.S. political system's view? And it springs to my mind what Mitt Romney was saying, that corporations are people. I think people should keep that in mind. And so they are all over the oil. They have one of the things that I'm sure Dr. Obi knows well, we'll talk about, is the devastation on Nigerian communities. I visited Port Harcourt once. You could hardly breathe. Your eyes were tearing because of all the environmental devastation. In the U.S., when there was the oil spill in the Gulf, we all know how big a deal it was. Somebody has calculated that there have been 30 times the type of spill we had in the Gulf in Nigeria. And the corporations are at the heart of this, are at the bottom of this. They are in cahoots, more or less, with the government of Nigeria. They take the oil, they give the government a little money and export the rest back, and the people of Nigeria get very little out of it except the pollution and the devastation of their natural environment.
And Dr. Obi, you were about to say something? No, Dr. Obi, I thought you were about yeah.
That is a correct assessment of the situation. I have not yet talked about the communities of the Niger Delta, because the spill from Shell has already reached the shore. We are in contact with communities that are telling us that there are huge oil slicks that have drifted ashore in their communities, and they are wondering, is this not the oil that has spilled offshore? And we think it is. But Shell has brought up this rather serious argument that this is the oil that was spilled by a third party. Because we also know that Shell's own experts had predicted that by about a week or so, going into this spill, the spill is naturally going to spread beyond a certain area. And we are seeing now that area includes the shoreline of these communities that we are talking about. then which third party has immediately also spilled oil that is drifting onto the shoreline? I think that is an unfortunate defense that is coming from Shell. And Chevron, too, which is an American company, Chevron is battling very hard. And I think in this case, the spill that is occurring there as we speak is about as large as the one that happened in the Gulf of Mexico. How come there is such scant media attention given to the spills that are occurring off the coast of Nigeria and within the country? Mm-hmm. Even the local media has not lashed up onto these issues that are really devastating the environment on a daily basis. So we think that there's a certain conspiracy of silence in the international media and also in the local media, probably because nobody from the Niger Delta owns a media organ that can sufficiently highlight these issues.
And that's Dr. Edward Obi. He is Executive Director of the Center for Social and Corporate Responsibility in Port Harcourt, Nigeria. We're talking about the situation in Nigeria following the removal of the fuel subsidies. And also in the studio with us is Mr. Nia Kwete, an African analyst here based in Washington, D.C. You're listening to Africa Now on WPFW. Nia, you wanted to make a comment on that as well?
Yes, because I think people should understand that Shell has a very long rap sheet, as they say in the United States, a very long record. Mr. I was looking at you when Dr. Obi was speaking, because you and I know during the anti-apartheid struggle, when we were trying to get international companies to cut off oil supplies to the apartheid regime in South Africa, Shell was in our face saying no, they will do no such thing, and they stuck with the apartheid regime. So for me, I see no change in Shell's way of behaving towards issues important to Africans, whether they are Nigerians or South Africans or elsewhere. So I think that needs to be put into context, because what Shell is doing is no accident. They will spill oil, they will dissemble about it, they won't take responsibility. I mean, they are talking about third party. If we know that you, as the Dr. Obi said, there's a double spill, why are we talking about a third party? Why aren't you doing it? And I think Dr. Obi is right about the silence in the media, but we have to take lessons. I mean, we have very good technological globalization now with Twitter and all those things that are pushing the revolutions in North Africa. So I will hope that Nigerians will not wait for the media. It will be good if the media gets involved, but we have to go around them. We have to link up with people, because there are people of goodwill all over the world, including the United States, who would like to highlight this and push it.
And also wanted to, touching on the oil companies, one of the reasons the government said that they want to remove the subsidies was saying that they want to recoup the losses from petroleum smuggling of petroleum. Was that plausible reason, Dr. Obi? First, I'll start with you.
Well, that reason is not plausible, because what we call in Nigeria illegal bunkering is a very open trade in stolen oil that we know very well that the government knows all about. The NNPC knows all about. Indeed, we have been informed that some of these barges stealing oil have been escorted by the Nigerian Navy. So it's not anything that is hidden. It's something that is done with the collusion probably of some very prominent people in government, in the military, the Navy in particular, and other politicians. So I don't think that the government so far is serious enough about shutting down that segment of the economy that steals the oil from the people of Nigeria, because people probably their political associates are involved. We think that yes, the subsidy should be removed. But first mistake that the government did, there was not sufficient discussion with the people. They did not canvass this idea sufficiently among the people, and till today, people are still asking what exactly was that about. Secondly, I think they presumed that there is only one way of doing economics. As far as I'm concerned, economics is about people. If people's lives somehow are worse off on account of a certain economic decision, then such economics is very bad economics. I think that the government can do better with this, consulting people, getting to see where it pinches for the people, and then tailoring our economic policy accordingly. Thirdly, I think that the people of the Niger Delta in particular, where the oil comes from, deserve some kind of a benefit from that industry. If you check the price of oil in all of the OPEC countries, you find out that there's no way any of those countries are paying the market price for oil. And that is the only benefit that people who produce oil should have. This is why we think that, well, whilst we agree in principle with removing the subsidy, we also think that a benefit should accrue to the people who my colleague in the studio with you there has said are suffering the hardships related with the pollution that comes from the oil industry.
So you're saying
all of these arguments are being played about here.
So you're saying that, but even removing the subsidy, won't that hurt the people right now?
No, even removing the subsidy, there's no guarantee that the money that will come from removing that subsidy will actually be deployed to solving the economic needs of the people today. It's a matter of trust, you see. In the past, the people have trusted that the government would do this and would do that, and the government did not. One important thing that this government must do is to rebuild trust with the people. The people have no trust in the government, and the government knows this. They must work hard at building trust so that we can, in a transparent way, people can see that the result of the removal of the subsidy translate into better economic prospects for all of the people of our country.
So you would say that if they remove the subsidy, then the price of oil should be much lower?
When they remove the subsidy, the price of oil will somehow stabilize at some market value. But what about the people who are suffering daily the hardships connected with the oil industry? Shouldn't there be some policy in which probably oil within that area, within that region, let's say the Niger Delta, is actually subsidized in some way, or maybe the benefit is given to the people to get oil at a cheaper rate than those who live, for instance, in Kanu or Sokoto, where they do not produce oil.
Mm-hmm. I think Nia had another comment here.
Yes, if the subsidy is removed, just in terms of economics, you are going to get inflation booming through the whole system, from transportation to food and everything. So how you remove it is extremely important. But I do think that one thing that we should underline and we should keep in mind is that it may be that there is a silver lining, because the government now has been forced to realize that it should be talking and consulting. It has set up a commission. It has said that it is going to look at corruption. It is going to put this $8 billion that it says it will take off the subsidies into various projects. So I think what Nigerians need to do, from people like Dr. Obi, civil society, the labor union, all the stakeholders, they need to keep, so to speak, hold the government's feet to the fire. They need to make sure that all these promises they have made, and the commission that has been set up, and labor is part of it, they need to work with them to make sure everything is done that the government needs to do, so they can clean a lot of the corruption out of the system. They should not relax on their oars and say, well, we got the government to roll back some of the subsidies, so everything is okay. Everything is not okay, because actually what President Jonathan has done is he's gotten away with a 50% increase in the price of fuel. And that's a massive increase.
The biggest increase so far that has been done.
And Dr. Obi, before we're about to run out of time, I wanted to touch on the situation of the soldiers being deployed right after the demonstrations. How is the situation in Port Harcourt and other places? And Wally Soyinka has spoken out against.
Port Harcourt right now, this evening, Port Harcourt is very calm. And I've been out in the streets drove around up and down in Port Harcourt, I did not see soldiers deployed, except soldiers in their normal duties. But it surprises everybody in this country that soldiers were deployed in Lagos. Lagos is not part of the emergency regions in the country. Why are soldiers on the streets of Lagos? All you can think about is provocation. You know, something can start, an incident can come about, somebody can get shot, and then that would lead into something that this government is not really prepared for. So it's surprising. Thanks be to God, here in Port Harcourt, there are no soldiers on the streets. And all that we see this evening are long lines of queues for people trying to get petrol in their tank because the petrol stations have refused to adjust the pump price, and they still think they should sell at 141 naira, claiming that they bought the product at that cost, and they should recoup their expenses. But the question that also is being asked is, what about the ones that you bought when petrol was 65 naira and you sold at 141 naira? What about the gains that you made there? Couldn't there be a balance of the two? And resorting to 97 naira as the government has promised you have.
And briefly,
so I think I really thank you, Miza. If I'm wrapping up now, I think probably. Or you have another question before I wrap?
Yeah, sorry. I was just saying that briefly, if you could tell us what type of solidarity you're looking for from people here in the U.S. with Nigerians.
We would like people in the U.S., activists and men and women of goodwill, to keep Nigeria in view and to see the pain and the sufferings of the people of Nigeria, particularly the people in the Niger Delta, and to note that we are working, like my colleague in the studio with you has said, we are not resting on our oars. We will make sure that there is transparency and accountability, because the success of the present strike, of the just concluded strike, has emboldened Nigerians. We now know that we can do this. And I'm sure if the government does not live up to the promises that it is making, there might be another strike round about March, as we are hearing. And when that strike occurs, the PENGASM, which is the Senior Staff Association of the oil works people, they will shut down the oil industry in Nigeria, and they have promised that they will all take a trip each out of the region so that it will be very hard to locate them. And we know that this country would collapse in about 2 weeks if that were to be done. So we hope that the government does not allow this to happen, and that people would be sensible about what they're discussing in this area.
Thank you very much. And that's Dr. Edward Obi, and he is the Executive Director of the Center for Social and Corporate Responsibility in Port Harcourt, Nigeria. And also in the studio with us is Nia Kwete, Analyst on African Affairs Issues here in Washington, D.C. I don't know if you had any closing remarks, very brief remarks. We're running out of time.
Yes, I do. I just second and underline what Dr. Obi said, that there needs to be solidarity between people of goodwill here, and that people need to keep focusing on Nigeria, because as Nigeria goes, so goes West Africa, so goes Africa.
Thank you very much. And before we end the show today, I just want to announce that the WPFW Programs Association continues the support of the Occupiers Drive as temperatures drop. Help warm the hearts of and the bodies committed activists braving the elements for a more humane world for all of us. Thus far, the listeners' response has been tremendous, and the occupiers thank you. And once again, we invite you to drop off blankets, water, soup, coffee, and other items at on this week at the bring them to Soul 57, 1326 Florida Avenue Northeast. And you can get more information by calling WPFW 202-588-0999, extension 0. And thank you again. This is Africa Now Today. I'm your host, Moiza Muntali, Public Outreach Director at TransAfrica. I thank you for joining us. And our producers are Joy Jefferson Nuri, James Pope, and Nike Oya Banjo. And also special thanks to engineer Luke Stewart and everybody here at WPFW. Have a great day. Have a great day.
At 89.3 FM, this is member-supported WPFW, Washington.